Now, we could go back and forth on the quality of data inputs and data outputs of those different insights that you get from predictive analytics. But for a moment, let's assume that you get a perfectly good predictive alert that detects an anomaly in your operation or your equipment. What do you go and do now? Can you can you share maybe an example from your experience, either in your past or working with your current customers, on when you've gotten a predictive alert and what you did after you got that alert?
So this is pre-AI, right?
Yeah.
We're looking. So I guess that process. Think about a generator that had an interesting call. Um, the driver side didn't have as many instruments. We had a little more information on the generator end, but normally the process would go, and with in this case, get an alert, something that says that something's off. So first thing I would do is I'd pick up the phone and I would call out to the field and okay, make sure that they are seeing what data points that I'm seeing that have moved and that was alerted to us, and make sure that that's real. And then you start the dig in phase where you have to go and reach out to whoever's running your EAM system and your work orders and start pulling that. And then we'd also plug in with your rotating equipment or reliability engineers and get them to start pulling and dragging the information together on that equipment. And then you also go to your operations team to see what kind of things are changing there. So you're reaching out to a bunch of different sources, trying to pull as much of that information together and centralize it as possible. And in that particular case, we ended up finding so the oil level was slowly rising, but with the sight glass, the level was consistent. But it started looking like we were overloading the engine and it was starting to get hot. So we're having a cooler issue. So this drug on over time, and it took multiple tries at going back and looking at the source data and looking at the unit before we were able to find what it was that was actually increasing the temperatures, and looked like it was a load event, but the loads weren't there. So that process used to take a lot more time when you had to reach out to so many different locations.
Yeah, absolutely. And Cody, I know we've got some examples of sort of the before and after of what this process looked like for Uptime AI customers. Can you share? I think there's a refining customer. Can you share one of the stories of sort of the way things used to be done versus the way that they're done with the Uptime AI implementation?
Yeah, definitely. So I think a good example is it was a refining customer. We saw an alert pop up on a pump. It was the bottoms pump of a tower, and initial thought was it must be some kind of reliability issue, right? Maybe it was bearing related, maybe it was seals, maybe it was the motor. But when you start to look at the broader system, what we found out is that although the symptoms were manifesting on the pump, it was actually an upstream process issue. Essentially, the reboiler or the heat exchanger was severely fouled, which meant not enough heat getting into the bottom of the distillation tower, and the fluid within was polymerizing, and more viscous fluid put excessive load on the pump, which was causing those reliability issues. So while predictive alerts can be useful, those don't solve the problem by themselves, right? The value comes from being able to connect pump behavior to upstream process data, the equipment context, the domain knowledge, and that's where we still see organizations struggling, right? You may be able to detect issues early, but the investigation can still depend on finding that right expert. Give them enough time and hope that they can connect all of the dots across the systems. And that's really why I think this next step beyond just predictive analytics is really the reasoning layer. It's not just saying, hey, something's wrong, but saying this is the most likely cause. Here's all the supporting evidence. Here's what's changed. And here are the actions to go correct that issue.